Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to episode 186. You know, we got to come up with a plan for episode 200. That's like, what, 14 more shows? That's like coming up. So we need to build a plan, guys. Anyway, hey, I was just shoeing the new horse out in the barn when Jeff and Ryan showed up. Hey, I'm JD Webb, and I'll probably have to paint the ceiling in the kitchen after they leave. But hey, the Mead House podcast, we are absolutely everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify. I'm not going to go through the whole list. You can take a look at them. They're all on the front page of the website at themeadhouse.com. In this episode, immerse yourself in the diverse cuisines of the Nords, Bossamer, Khajiit, and beyond with these recipes inspired by food found in the Old Kingdom across Tamriel and more. I have no idea what any of that means, but Jeff does. He'll be along here shortly to explain all that. And I'm sure I probably didn't cover it very good. In segment 2 and 3, hey, you know what? We're going to do another double take on the social club. So we got a ton of stuff that we've collected, and we'll be dealing with some of your posts, including one that one of the 3 that Ryan contributed last week about sour yeast strains. That'd be interesting to learn about that. But hey, all that and more here at the Mead House. But first, we like to give a big old thank you out there to all of the Mead House keyholders who help keep the Mead House podcast free. You too can become a Mead House keyholder and help support the show for as little as $2 a month. That's all it takes. We're not asking for a lot. We've got some great thank you gifts to send out to you, plus a listing of keyholder only content over there. Some really interesting interviews that we've done in the past. I promise we'll pile up some more. Get on over to patreon.com, search for the Mead House, or just simply click on the link in the show notes. What are we drinking tonight? I'm double fisting it in Mead House tradition, but you're going to be completely dissatisfied with the second choice. I'll get to that in a minute. The first one, I've been kind of on this rum thing here lately. And always looking, I mean, the whole bourbon thing. I've got my bourbons that I like to incorporate into meads. And the list isn't very long. My library or catalog or my bourbon shelf is quite large, but my list that of bourbons that I would actually use in a mead isn't that big, okay? And that was a quest of mine to that started this whole bourbon thing, looking for a quality bourbon that I would like to incorporate into a mead. Rum is something else that I would like to incorporate in a mead, and I've been tasting quite a few. One that I really, really like, and it's a very bourbon-like quality to it, is Diplomatico. Not an expensive rum. I believe you can find it for probably under $30, $32 somewhere at your local liquor store. Really good. It's very sweet though, so I don't drink a whole lot of it. But It's got great brown sugars and caramelized. Those caramels, those caramelized caramels. What is that anyway? Caramelized caramel. Isn't it like isn't caramel like caramelized sugar anyway? You get what I mean. It's got that great caramel, almost a dark. If you ever had C's candies, okay, not the lighter one, but the darker one. Okay, that Diplomatic was reminiscent of that. That's what it reminds me of. Lots of brown sugars and everything, but that's not what I'm drinking here tonight. I found a new one, and this one comes not really by mistake because we picked up another bottle of rum made by the same outfit, Plantation, and we use it in mixed drinks, and it's really, really good. It's a dark rum. It's very rum-like. Bacardi's, throw that down the drain. Go get some Plantation dark rum. Use that in your drinks. That is really fantastic stuff. Well, Plantation also makes another one. This is a special reserve XO. This happens to be the 28th, I think. Let's see what that says. 20th anniversary. This is actually aged 20 years. Now, rum, this is a Barbados rum. I failed to say that. Barbados, probably the first place. I mean, you can read a lot of historical documents about rum and whatnot, but Barbados has been known to be the place where rum was found. Okay. But a lot of other places also claim that title as well. But, history has it that Barbados was the first place where rum purchase was recorded and was a key stop on the triangle trade routes in the old world. So a lot of these rums, Barbados rums, they're aged in whiskey barrels and bourbon barrels. Which is not all that unusual. But this particular one, Plantation, has a very nice quality to it. It's very, I don't want to say it's bourbon-like, but you do get the nuances of that bourbon barrel. But rum, you get that molasses flavor. There's a sweetness to it. Talk about bananas and coconuts. Oh, my God. This stuff, mm, 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 mm. Oh my word! This is an outstanding rum. Now, mind you, this is not this particular one. Plantation is 20-year old rum. Is not a rum that you would want to throw into like a Mai Tai or whatever. Okay, don't waste good rum on mixed drinks. Okay, just don't. This is one you want to put in a little snifter and just sit with it for a while. I keep talking about sitting in that overstuffed chair at the little table next to me, reading a book, sipping on a good bourbon. Well, this rum is the same thing. All right, take some time with it. Plantation, again, this is a Barbados rum, 20 years aged in barrels, outstanding, very good. Around 50, I'm going to say you could probably pick it up for less than $55. I think it was 50. I think I paid 51 or 52 over at our favorite liquor store here in town. It's a kind of a discount liquor store, but they got like everything. Good stuff. So in my other fist, I told you it wasn't going to be very exciting. Guess what it is? Take a guess, Jeff.
Glass water?
Yes, water. Yeah, water. I have to start drinking. I have to cut down on my liquor again. My doctors are getting a little, let's say, terse with me a little bit about my sugar numbers, and my diabetes doctor kind of comes unglued every time I send my sugar counts in and whatnot. So I got to be starting being a little more careful about how much liquor I'm consuming. So, but anyway, Jeff, what did you put in your glass tonight?
So I have two selections in my glass tonight, as usual, Mead House fashion. In the first glass, I don't know if you got yours, but I got my Sap House box today.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, mine hasn't come yet.
So I have cracked open a bottle of the calendula mead, and calendula is like kind of a marigold. It's a flower. It's been foraged, and this is actually fairly dry for a Sap House mead. This may be the driest mead I've had from them. It has some perceptual sweetness, but overall it has a good, like almost aggressive amount of acidity. That's not terrible by any stretch, but it's new and interesting. I'm getting some of the floral notes along with the wildflower honey. Yeah, this is really really bright and delightful, actually.
What kind of flower did you call it?
This is calendula. So it's in the marigold family, I believe.
Okay.
And they note that it's also brewed with chamomile, I believe, in their little insert sheet here.
Ah, okay.
And then in the other glass, I have one that I made. This is actually a bit of a story behind this one. My wife has a friend or acquaintance that she's been talking to for quite a while, off and on. They kind of like they'll touch base every few months, like you do. Mm-hmm. And at some point, I want to say late last summer, she was talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, so have you ever heard of mead?" And she's like, "Yes."
Yeah,
like,
have you?
Well,
yeah.
I'm just wondering. I've got all this leftover honey from my bees, and was thinking about doing something with it. And she's like, "Wait, A, you have bees? B, I didn't tell you what my husband does for fun."
Oh yeah.
So.
Oh wow.
So to make a long story short, rather than him stumble through like 2 or 3 batches to get good, we kind of worked out a deal where he would give me a pretty sizable quantity of honey. I'd make a batch and show him how it's done, and we'd kind of just short circuit his learning curve a little bit here. And I had just bottled up the lavender blossom that I don't think you got a taste of yet. I'm so behind on boxes, you guys. So anyway, I had just bottled that up, and gave him a taste of that, and he enjoyed it. So I made something really similar to that, but with Kansas wildflower honey. And I let it ferment to dry, about 10%. The only problem is, for whatever reason, this honey that I had in there had this weird bitter taste once all the sugar was gone. I couldn't figure out what exactly it was. I figured it must have been something the bees were snacking on that day. But I didn't want this guy's first shot out of the park for homemade mead to be nasty and bitter and undrinkable. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do to save this? And I remembered that I had some sugar maple, like spirals. I aged it on that for a while, and that cut it down quite a bit, actually. The added tannin and the interesting, like, kind of, I think it's like a yellow cakey kind of a note that the sugar maple lends, along with a little bit of like almost but not quite a maple syrup flavor. That toned it down quite a bit. And I was like, okay, well, what can I do to just take it that little extra bit further? Carbonate it. So I got it really, really carbonated. We got that bottled up finally. I want to say last weekend. And so, yeah, no, I've got a little bit of it left for my own personal use. And he took a large share of it home because he brought, the honey for it.
Excellent. And,
I'm for a kind of a problem-solving recipe or batch. I'm pretty pleased with this. It came out really nice. There's just, it's on the dry side of semi-sweet. A lot of carbonation that does fade because there's really nothing for it to hang on to as far as like proteins or anything like that. So it degasses fairly quickly once it's in a glass. But flavors really came together. It does a nice job of kind of muting out that bitterness to where it's not really really there much at all unless you're really searching for it. So plenty pleased with that one.
Sounds good. Yeah, maybe the bees were over in the neighbor's yards eating the flowers, eating the weeds or something. I don't know.
It could have been goldenrod, or
Yeah.
there are some pollens that are just nasty.
Nasty.
You don't want to get it.
Hey Ryan, what did you put in your glass tonight, bud?
So I'm drinking tonight one of my Infinity Meads, and it's so I started doing these because I was cleaning out the cellar, and I had a lot of meads that were okay, right? They were like your C player, C plus, meads, and they're fine. I mean, they weren't like drain cleaner meads, and I know a lot of people do put those down the drain. They say, hey, I'm just gonna put it down the drain. JD, you might be one of them from time to time. But I kind of have that whole waste not, want not. It might not be perfect, but it's drinkable, etc., etc. And so I started doing this. I don't know how long it's been, but to be honest, I've had a handful of cases of stuff that I thought was, so, and I'd use it in mead tails and things like that. I'd make some pretty good mead tails out of it. Nothing wrong. I mean, it's a great mead to make your mead tails with.
Mm-hmm.
I think in past episodes I've called it everything from mead tail, mixers to sangria meads to whatever.
Sure.
And I'm getting down there where I've got maybe a case and a half left of the stuff that I'd say is kind of the mead tail mixers or the sangria meads or whatever they are, and it's always ever changing, right? It changes all the time because I just kind of keep infinitying up this bottle. But I've also been using it, drinking it here a little bit more as the weather's gotten cold, because I make my little For My Health cocktail, which is a shot of my elderberry syrup liqueur that I make.
Yeah.
And then I mix that into my mead tail. So I'm working hard tonight. I'm drinking for my health, and I'm drinking to clean out the cellar of the sangria meads.
Sounds good. Yeah, the city sent me a letter, told me, hey, JD, you need to quit dumping that stuff down the drain because we're afraid this stuff is so volatile that it might cause an explosion in the sewer lines. So, oh, my God. Anyway, well, good stuff. Back to the top of this thing, okay? Immerse yourself in the diverse cuisines of... Okay, Jeff, this is where you come in. Nord, yep. Bosmer... What is it? Khajiit?
Yes. So this is from a video game. In case it wasn't completely obvious to everyone listening, week on, week out, my wife and I are nerds. And, fantasy video games have been one of the things that when we first started talking years and years and years ago now, they were one of the things we could kind of vibe on because we had very similar tastes. So for Christmas, she knows I like to cook. We're both big fans of this Elder Scrolls series, and she finds this recipe book, the Elder Scrolls Official Cookbook. And so I look at it, I open it, I'm like, okay, well, this could be fun. This might be silly. This might be, somebody taking things seriously. It could go either way, and I'm interested. So I start looking through some of these recipes, and they actually look fairly good. I've actually made a loaf of the honey lavender bread and like a vegetable soup that they had in there, and both were fairly good. So this is obviously like an IP that somebody has themed stuff after, but they know what they're doing. They put good recipes in here.
Yeah.
Obviously, when I was looking through the table of contents, I got to the drinks section, and they have a mead recipe because the latest game in this series is in this kind of a Scandinavian Viking-ish aesthetic or milieu or whatever, and so Mead figures in a lot to that. I'm like, okay, well, professional curiosity at this point. I've got to see what they've got to say here. I was expecting, like Joe's Ancient Orange, or some kind of like beginner accessible, really easy crap recipe. Frankly, something that they would throw together really easily. But no, I was actually really surprised. Rather than do something that's very cloyingly sweet and has to sit for like 3 to 6 months before you even take a taste of it, they're making a hydromel. The recipe here is for a fairly light mead. They say it's ready to drink in about 2 weeks with a little bit of bubble. It's not going to be clear. And I'll give the base recipe here for a start. It's pretty simple: 2 cups of honey, 6 to 8 cups of spring water, and a packet of ale yeast, and that's it.
That's it. Wow. Okay.
The next pages, they go through 4 different like variations of things you can add, like fruits and spices and things like that. And this is in that kind of a Scandinavian Viking aesthetic. So it's stuff that is very very much in that Scandinavian kind of palette. But I got to thinking about this and went, this is actually, as far as the like beginner or approachable mead recipes for people that are not really looking to get into homebrew, this is actually one of the better ones I've seen. They don't give you a bunch of crap advice like use bread yeast or raisins for nutrients or stuff like that. The recipes are pretty simple. It's approachable. So, for somebody that listens to the show regularly, you can probably skip this recipe unless you're really interested in the flavor components and the stuff that they put in the later stuff. But for somebody that is maybe thinking about getting into making a mead or homebrewing in general, or somebody that has a cooking background and wants to try this maybe on a small scale to see if they like it, this is actually one of the better approaches I've seen. So yeah, no, I was really pleasantly surprised.
Well, isn't there? Yeah. I mean, there's almost sounds like there's. I mean, when you go back through the whole history of mead and the whole 9 yards, I mean, it takes you back to the Nordic Viking culture, and so is there? It almost sounds like there's somewhat of a historical component, because it seems like this game is based off of some sort of, I don't know,
yes, kind of, sort of. They've, like I said, they took the kind of aesthetics of like, the horned helmets and, fur in the armor, and there's very, very much like artistic license taken here to where this is not how things were in Viking times, but they took those kind of elements and like Nordic and Germanic mythology. They added elements of that along with just the overarching lore of the whole series to kind of make it its own thing. So yeah, no, it has elements that are recognizable to, the casual viewers going, oh yeah, well that looks Viking-ish. Okay. That makes sense.
I've been watching this. Actually, I'm watching 2 series. One, it's an older television production called The Vikings. And I can't remember. I think it's on Netflix. I think that's where I'm watching it. But quite often you see them in these little taverns and whatnot, and they're always drinking ale. Another cup of ale, And I'll often wonder, what are they calling ale? Could that be mead? Could that be a honey-based, thing, or is it actually ale? I mean, is this made with grains or whatever? But it's always intrigued me. And of course, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say if it's being called ale, it's probably something predominantly grain. Yeah. If it's being called mead, it's probably something predominantly honey. I know.
Yeah, but would it have been called mead back then? I mean, where does even that word come from? That's what I don't know. Who came up with the word mead? Or is that a
I don't know
historical?
what people of ancient Scandinavian descent would have called it.
Yeah.
I know most Indo-European languages, which is a very broad family of languages, have something that sounds like miod or med or miel or something like that for the word for honey. And generally, the word for mead is derived from the word for honey, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's.
Well,
I'm not.
I've always dug the kind of the historical, and that's what kind of intrigued me. When we talked about last week when we, why meat? Why what got you started? And
Mhm.
I just stumbled across it, and when I started looking into it and started reading more and more and more about it, come to find out there's two beverages on this planet that rank the oldest. Okay, beer and mead. And I mean, it's a toss up which came first, but um, you know, at that point, it really doesn't make any difference. We're talking thousands of years old. I mean, after
Right.
thousands of years, who cares? But mead was intriguing because it wasn't grain; it was actually honey and just water I mean it's some of the old the historical pages talks about. I mean, obviously there was no yeast. Uh,
Well, there was yeast. It just wasn't
it's
cultivated like we have.
yeah. I mean, yeah, you didn't just rip open a package of 71D and dump it into your vessel
Right.
and whip up a couple gallons of mead. So it's rather intriguing. I mean, that's what that's what prompted me to get started. Okay, just let's find out what this stuff is. So I
Yeah.
think it's a valuable experience for
Well,
one.
and another thing that I will say about this book that I really like, it plays in a favorable way towards the kind of, I guess, the Nordic Scandinavian palate. I mean,
Yeah,
I know a lot of people that are first getting into mead go, I want to make mead like the Vikings, and I'm going to make this mead with oranges and cloves in it. I'm not sure that's what the Vikings would have drank. Um, but I look at some of the recipes here, and I don't want to give the recipes for their particular brands because I mean they have a book to sell. So
yeah,
if you're interested, check it out. But would a Viking have drink a mead with some kind of like juniper and berry combination in it?
yeah,
Probably. But
yeah.
that's probably stuff that they would have harvested and wanted to preserve. And alcohol is a great way to do that. So yeah, no, that to me that strikes a chord as being a little bit more true than just I'm going to throw some stuff in a bucket and hope for the best.
So in your notes, you talk about some of the you've broken it down at the pros, cons, and then the end result. Let's tackle the pros here a little bit.
Yeah,
Base recipe to add ingredients to. I mean, I think we all know that honey,
right.
water,
And
and then whatever else, right?
yeah, and this is something that we talk about quite a bit actually. A good
Yeah,
mead maker kind of has their style, what they like, X amount of honey to Y amount of water, and then you can tool with the flavor components there that way. I think that's a great approach to this.
hmm
Another one that I liked, again, they're using ale yeast, not bread yeast. They don't throw in stuff like raisins for nutrients. They also include footnotes that say, hey, take this as a starting point, try your own flavor combinations. Local wildflower honey is a great way to start. You can also play around with varietal honeys like orange blossom honey
hmm
and get interesting flavor notes out of that. So like
yeah,
this is all really viable approaches for somebody that is maybe thinking about getting into mead or has never really thought about getting into mead, but saw this and thought, oh, this could be interesting. I think it's a great gateway for getting people into the hobby. There are
well,
definitely some cons to this approach. Some things I didn't, I don't think that they're necessarily the best in it. For one, the only sanitation at all is, boil your water.
boil
That's it.
boil the water.
And on the one hand, Yes. At least they're not saying to put the honey in the water and boil that combination together. We're past that.
Well,
But
are they relating this to ancient times, or they actually mean like boil your tap water for purity? Um,
it sounds like they're using the boiling water to both sanitize the inside of the half-gallon glass
yeah, okay, yeah.
jug that you're going to be fermenting in, and just to make it easier to mix up the honey.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I wish there was a little bit more care given to sanitation, but again, this is a food recipe book that is not specifically geared towards homebrewers, and every other like alcohol related recipe in this book is take this finished alcohol, mix with this and this and this. There is no other fermentation going on in this book. So yeah, I can understand they need to cut some corners, but as somebody that is going from this into the wider world of making other meads or homebrewing, that would be one of the first things I would say you have to learn, because it just is.
Yeah.
The other thing I didn't like is that they don't address nutrient at all. And there are some ingredients that may provide some small level of nitrogen, and this is supposed to be a quick mead, so for hydromel, for a quick mead, it's not as big a deal, I guess, but it's another thing that, if you're going to take this and then go further with it, you're going to have to learn that real quick.
Well, you said two cups of honey and 4 cups of water, right? That's basically
6 to 8 cups of water.
Okay, 6 to, well, even at that, 6 to 8 cups of water with 2 cups of honey. I mean, that's probably actually quite a bit of honey. At that level,
right? And then you're just fermenting it for 2 weeks, though.
Yeah,
so I think the idea is to have a low alcohol kind of fizzy beverage that is
relying on the CO2 that builds up to be the fizz, right? That would be my take. I mean, something. I mean, trying to deal with the ancient times in this, and with modern, sort of modern brewing methods, but. Yeah, they're getting their fizz instead of, from a CO2 canister and a keg. They're getting it from the actual yeast in the brew. So just relying on that CO2 development to give them their carbonation. Interesting. So
yeah, overall, I thought I was really pleasantly surprised with this. And, for our listeners, you might be interested in checking out the flavor combinations they give for some of their stuff, or just some of the food recipes, which do look to be well put together. I'm not sure the basic process is, really sound, but for anybody listening that got started making mead from this recipe, or that gets started in the future, let us know how you found it as a starting experience.
Well, and it's a small enough batch that you're not going out and buying, like we do, 60 pounds of freaking honey at a time. I mean, you could probably, what like the three main honeys out there, like what, wildflower, clover, and orange blossom honey. I mean, you can find those virtually everywhere. In the stores even. I see all 3 of them. Sage might be another one, the 4th one if you want to add that one in. I frequently see all 4 of those in supermarkets everywhere. Costco's, I mean, you name it. So, so it doesn't have to be a special kind of honey. We're just talking about honey or something basic. So, it would be a good start. I mean, if you've never... I could see this if you were an avid game player, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are deep into that Game of Thrones thing. And this is where, remember back, gosh, maybe we can go back pre-Ryan time here at the Mead House, when Mississippi we were talking about making this graph. I don't know, Ryan, were you here when we were doing that? Talking about making graph?
I don't know if I was there when you made the graph, but I remember when you guys were tasting the graph.
Yeah, I mean, it was a recipe taken from this fictional series. There was, they had talked about drinking this graph, and I mean, I don't know whether there's any rhyme or reason to it, but somebody came up with a recipe. Okay, and I mean, it was probably one of the biggest uh, uh, forum boards over on. Oh gosh, help me out here. What's the name of that forum? Probably the
Homebrew
biggest.
Talk?
Homebrew Talk.
The homebrewtalk.com. Yeah, probably one of the biggest brewing forums out there. And it was one of the largest. Uh, uh, I mean, it had literally thousands of posts under this, this guy's recipe for graph. Of course, Mississippi and I made it. We made it almost the same time. I think we're just several days apart, maybe a week apart. But it was interesting. We tracked it for a good while and compared notes on it on air on the show. But I think for people who are heavy into these games, these sorts of games, I
Oh
think
yeah.
this is a cool thing actually because
Well,
another series that I'm watching that I'm heavily. I mean, I have binge watched the first three seasons in 2 days. Okay, I'll tell you what I'm doing with my COVID time. All right, it's called Poldark, and this is a British series put out by Masterpiece. The old Masterpiece Theater thing. It starts off with this guy Poldark, Ross Poldark. He's a member. He's a captain in the British Army, and he's in Virginia. And the war has come to an end, and he goes back to Britain, back to his Cornwall and to his small little community. And that's where the series kind of starts. And I love that period of history. And them too. I mean, they're drinking ale. Okay, I mean they go to these taverns. I keep thinking, God, what the hell's in that ale? You know. But anyway, I mean, I'm not much of a gamer, but I do like movies and TV series related to that time period. So I can
mhm.
relate somewhat.
Well, and I think honestly, probably a lot of people that are getting into Mead at least have some kind of awareness of it from either gaming or movies. I mean, if you look at the last 20 years, fantasy has really taken off as a genre. We had the Lord of the Rings movies about 20 years ago now,
Oh yeah,
that hit theaters, and there was, a push from that. Um, then Game of Thrones, we had just a ton of fantasy gaming. Um,
yeah.
the latest edition of Dungeons and Dragons has really taken off. And,
A lot of people with a lot of time on their hands.
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and yeah,
I want
yeah.
to.
There are plenty of reasons for people to be interested in Mead. So I think this ticks a lot of boxes for them.
Well, and this is not. Although like some of us, I mean, you can get plumb buried in this hobby, like any
Yes.
other hobby. Okay, but it can be done in the simplest of terms, right, Ryan? I mean, we're not talking about something that takes a whole lot of cash. Okay, it doesn't. I mean, you can go get honey. I mean, that'd be the biggest expense for you. Yeast is cheap, and just the basic recipe: honey, water, and yeast. Nutrients, of course. Absolutely do your homework. But I want to hear from Ryan on this whole historical gaming thing about making mead. Dipping into the ale thing too at the same time. What's your thoughts on this? On this whole thing?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I really liked the knights, time period. The knights in shining armor and horses and jousting,
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff. And so I little play sets, when I was a little kid with that kind of like figure, action figures or whatever, and we'd make shields, out
yeah,
of plywood and take take like 1x2s and whack each other with them and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, similar. I mean, I enjoy the history and that kind of thing, but I'm not a big gamer or fantasy player or any of that stuff. But I enjoy that. As in terms of, I guess movies. I don't know if they had it in there, but I guess one of my favorite movies is the all-time classic. Probably Ron Howard's finest work, starring a great cast. Val Kilmer at his best is Willow.
Mm.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that one.
No, it's it might be
Childhood
overselling
classic
it.
right there.
Might be overselling it a little bit there, but that came out when I was a kid and enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like cheap, heck, I remember the first thing I ever made was a cider.
Mm-hmm.
And all I did is I went to a homebrew store and I bought a stopper, or a drilled stopper, a drilled bung, an airlock, and a pack of champagne yeast. And I was out of there. It was for like $2.50. And then I went down the block to a grocery store and bought a gallon of apple cider in a glass jug.
Mm-hmm.
And I poured myself a cup and drank it. Drank the cup just to make a little headspace there, and dumped in the champagne yeast and put the bung and the airlock on and let it rip.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first ever fermenting thing. So I mean, that was like a $7 endeavor, a $7.50 endeavor. It was probably $5 for the juice and $2.50 for the supplies. So, something like that. So yeah, you can go real cheap, with that. You can, go buy a jug of apple juice or go to a store and buy an empty, gallon jug and go from there. I mean, you could make a cider real easy if you bought a jug of apple juice and poured yourself a glass and dumped in some honey and let it rip. The other thing, and is people talk about bottles. Like once you get into bottling, or your 12-ounce long neck. So I was talking to a buddy because a buddy's like, "So how much do you pay for those? Bottles?" And I go, "I honestly don't think I've ever bought bottles. No, let me check." So I flipped up the homebrew thing, and I was like, "Oh man!" So it looks like they're selling these for, I don't know, $20 a case. So $20 for 24 brown glass long necks, in a case. And I go, you could do that, or you could, go to Costco and for a couple of bucks cheaper, buy a case of like Sam Adams, for example, and to buy the Sam Adams sampler, and drink, so instead of $22 or whatever, $20, buy one for 16 or $18, or however much they're selling those for. Drink that, or any bottle like that, and then just put the bottles in a wash tub with a little, on their own, or some baking soda or some oxygen wash or something, because the Sam Adams labels will fall right off. Those Sam Adams ones are, I don't know if that's designed by them, because they, Jim Cook says he was a home brewer, when he got started, and founded I think, was one of the founders of like the Craft Brewers Association or something.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the point I was trying to make there was the you can get going real cheap and real scrappy if you want to, and then you just scale up from there, and you can still be pretty reasonable here. It's a little bit different than buying some of the big brew towers that some of the home brewers I've seen have, that are
Oh yeah,
impressive, but expensive.
Well, yeah, I think some, you know, I'm not sure, and I haven't ordered it yet. For some reason, I keep putting it off because I'm thinking, geez, I've had beer from different vessels, and does it really matter what sort of a vessel you brew your beer in? Um, so I'm kind of having second thoughts about spending the money on this, you know, deal from Spike Brewing. It's got a, I mean, it's a completely useful thing, okay, if you're an avid brewer, okay. But so I agree with you, Ryan. You can get plumb buried. I mean, some of the stuff I see on YouTube, these guys is garage brewing. I mean, holy cow! You'd think that they were brewing 500 cases of beer a week, uh, with their setups. But I'm just I'm brewing for me and whatever my neighbors want to consume. Which isn't a whole lot. So in fact, I've cut way back on my brewing. I no longer do two at a time. I just do one at a time. And but anyway, kind of getting off on a tangent here, Jeff. I think that it's very intriguing. I'm going to look into that book. I do like to cook, although I've kind of stepped back away from the kitchen a little bit. I got my
Mhm.
new instant pot, which takes all kinds of pain and suffering out of cooking.
It really does.
Yeah, it does. I just, in my old age, I'm kind of digging this whole one pot meal thing. But it also takes me back. I mean, not my younger, my older younger sister. I've got two sisters, one younger and one is older younger. However that goes. Anyway, she's the older of the two, younger than me. She's a not. See, here we go again. So I'm getting old. I can't even remember the name of this place. It's up in Northern California, up in the gold country up there. She's a docent in one of these little towns, and every year they have this gathering where they actually sort of build this town and period costumes, cooking, gold panning. I mean,
Fun.
it's a very historical event, and she's quite the cook, and she's written a cookbook. It's just a little paperback thing where she has collected. I mean, it's not her recipe, but she's collected recipes. Done quite a bit of research on colonial type cooking. The kind of cooking that you would have done coming to the old west. I mean, talking about yeast. Okay, there was no yeast.
Right.
You didn't buy packets of yeast. There was no such thing. Okay, your yeast came from the grains that you made flour with. Okay, all you had to do is mix it with water and let it sit, and it would start rising and fermenting on its own. And what comes to sourdough is used because it transported good. Okay, you could put sourdough in a container in a leather bag or whatever and transport it. And as long as you took care of it, even if you let it dry, okay, you could moisten the powdered or the flakes of yeast of sourdough yeast and reuse it, reconstitute it. So that was a whole. I mean, that was a whole concept. I mean, it's hard for us to deal with that because the simple thing is to go down to the store and buy a packet of Fleischmann's yeast. I mean, how simple is that?
Right.
We don't even think about how did they do this 150 years ago, 200 years ago. Okay, when there was no Fleischmann's yeast, there was no such thing as packets of yeast, and so this whole cooking thing. People laugh when I mean, a lot of my neighbors laugh at me when I talk about, the frontier staple, bacon, beans, and biscuits. The three B's. That was it. Why? Because flour was transportable. Beans were dried and transportable. Bacon was what they called salt pork, transportable, kept for months. Okay, throw it in a saddlebag, and you can go off for several months and eat fairly decently. I mean, you got protein in your beans. You can flavor them up with the bacon. Mash the beans between a couple of biscuits. I mean, and you were set. So a lot of these recipes, as simple as they seem to us now, this is an undertaking when all you had to cook over was either a campfire or a wooden stove. You know, 350, set your oven to 350 degrees? Really? Tell me what that is on a wood burning stove. Okay, how do you set your stove to 350 degrees if you're burning wood? So, I mean, where was the thermometer located on a wood burning stove in, 1848?
Right. And more often than not, it was probably your hand, because whoever taught
Yeah,
you to bake said, hold it here until, you can count to X,
yeah,
and then have to
exactly.
take it away.
Yeah,
And that's how you do
exactly.
that.
Yeah, so I dig. I like these books with these ancient type recipes. People that have conjured up using historical documents or whatever. And I'm sure this cookbook dates back to I mean somebody obviously took the time to put together a list of ingredients that might have been available back during the time period of this game, right?
Ish. Yeah, there
Yeah,
is definitely. I, I don't know if it's necessarily like historical ingredients so much as like something in that flavor, or responded to that. But I know a lot of the like the main courses and like appetizers and things like that. But some of the more savory applications use ingredients that I don't see a lot of in most of my other cookbooks, like leeks or
yeah,
cabbage. There's a lot of things that use cabbage because
yeah.
it's just a common foodstuff in that
Yeah,
part of the country. And
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Even in colonial America, cabbage was a mainstay because it kept for a long time because you could
and it
pickle it.
was a good source of vitamin C compared to everything else we had growing.
Yeah, yeah. And anyway, I don't want to spend a whole lot more time on this, but it's a great subject matter, Jeff. Thank you.
Sure.
I think it's great stuff, and I encourage people. We'll put the links up in the show notes on the website on this episode where you can go out and find that book. It's available on Amazon. That's where I picked up that little blurb about. I read that and I'm thinking, what the hell is this? And this place called what's it called? Khajiit.
So the Khajiit are a fantasy race. There's, this is like kind of like Lord of the Rings. There's elves. There's
Yeah,
dwarves. Khajiit are like they're like tiger people essentially.
tiger. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
it's wild.
Good stuff. Hey, if I was a gamer, that'd probably be one of the first ones I'd look into. Ryan, one of the three questions that you had posted, not from you, but ones you found, had to do with sour yeast strain. Has anyone ever tried using a sour yeast strain? Uh, I asked because I love sour beer, but I'm not sure how it would turn out in a mead. And since honey is expensive, I don't want to waste 2 pounds on such a risky flavor profile. 2 pounds, really? If you're dealing with like 20 pounds, yeah, but 2 pounds, come on. That's anyway. Ryan, throw your 2 cents in there, bud.
Yeah. So again, I saw this one. I thought it was interesting. We're talking about. I've done some different sour meads and really enjoyed them. The There's a lot of different sour strains that you can use. The one that I have liked is it's a blend from Y yeast, and I'm blanking on the number, but it had um, some it had some um, good good flavors in it. I don't know if there's like a lambic blend. I want to say it was the lambic blend,
Mm-hmm.
and really enjoy that. Now, if you're just doing a straight traditional, it can be hard to, the yeast, the honey might not take to it right away, or might not, might not.
Well,
Um,
okay, let me help you here. One of the questions that I would have right off the top, okay, uh, comes from not knowing anything about sour yeast strains. Okay, what difficulty would you have, okay, in getting this yeast started in a mead? What type of difficulties are we looking at
right. So if you're just doing a must, just a straight must, and depending on what you add, and Jeff probably knows the science on this better than I do, but that the must will just resist it. It won't ferment. It won't take, if there's not Saccharomyces in there, and it's just straight, lacto or PDO or Brett, it might not uh, ferment very well for you.
here? Okay.
So what I did was I also bought a pound of, at the first time I made a sour, was it was just traditional, and then I threw in a pound of maltodextrin. And maltodextrin it's kind of it has what the sour needs.
Okay.
It was able to ferment that and get that going pretty strong, and then the whole must ended up being fermenting out and giving that. So where I was going with this is that, first of all, yes, you can do sours. I've done a handful of sours since then. Trying to ferment a sour just straight from a traditional must or a honey must can be difficult. There are not the dextrins in there that the yeast, the sour yeast, like to munch on. So you might need to add something depending on the strain of yeast you're using. Maltodextrin, works. If you throw in some sort of some malt, some malt will work.
Mhm.
Things like that. I've even had sour ciders before. I've never made a sour cider, but I've had sour ciders. So I believe that you could probably take like apple juice and get some of the sour, some of the sour cultures to fire up on that, and put that into your must. So again, there are, yes, you can do it. There are ways to do it. It can be absolutely delicious. You've just a year ago, this year I got that Mazer Cup Award. And by the way, that Mazer Cup Award showed up just a couple of days after I was mentioning on the show that it hadn't shown up yet. So
Yeah.
I don't know if somebody was listening or what, but I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, whoever it was.
It looks nice up on the shelf there. But the year prior to that, I got an honorable mention, and I think I scored like a 4. It was crazy, right? Like I think I got like a 48 out of 50 or something, like really really high 40s, 47, 48 out of 50, at the Mazer Cup with a sour mead that then ended up taking an honorable mention. So it's crazy. Like, you talk about toughest competition, you can score really high and still miss out on a medal. Um, but anyway, that was a sour mead, and that was really impressed the judges there. So you can do it. You just gotta do. You just gotta be a little nurturing with the cultures that you have.
Yeah. Sounds good. This next one. This is by. Oh, come on, Jeff. What are these names?
Let's say user X Robin, maybe?
X Robin. X Robin. What does your mead smell like fermenting? Well, that kind of all depends. I'm on day 3 of my first ever batch is 5 liter of mead with, now this really sounds good, chopped apples, dehydrated cherries, and half dehydrated apricots. That actually sounds pretty good. Another
That could be
5 liters of just mead and raisins. Now, I hope you're using the raisins for flavoring and some mouthfeel. Raisins, if you put enough raisins in, they do contribute to a very nice kind of a viscous mouth feel. My raisin mead is fermenting nicely and steadily. I thought it had halted a bit today, so I added a little yeast nutrient today and oxygenated the demijohn. I also oxygenated my fruity mead. I need to go back, track this, Jeff. I'm a little concerned about this oxidation or oxygenated, what he's commenting on.
Hmm.
Also, did the same thing to his fruity mead, but didn't add the nutrient, as it seemed like it didn't need any. My fruity mead, however, has gone a bit wild. Not sure what he means there. I haven't left much headroom. Rookie mistake. Oh, okay, I get you there.
Yep.
So getting a bit of a blowout into the airlock with some cherry sediment. Been there, done that. So he cleaned the airlock, no biggie. I got a cure for that. We'll talk about that here in a minute. There's also a lot of bubbles in there. It's really taking off. However, this one, I suspect. Okay, he's talking about a pungent smell coming off of the what sounds like the cherry and apple stuff that he put together, and then the other one, I guess. And then he says this yesterday it smelled like a nice cider. Today it's really a bit of a sour nose punch. Is this normal? So let's go back, Jeff. So the oxygenated, the demijohn. So I guess okay. So we're looking at day 3 here.
Right.
Okay, so
Well,
he's safe
and
on the oxygen, the mixing
he
basically.
mentions this is, like first ever batches. So I
Yeah,
doubt he's gone to the trouble of buying like an oxygen system. He's getting like the pure oxygen to swirl in there. When he says oxygenating, I'm willing to bet this is like degassing, stirring, mixing it up.
yeah. Okay, and so okay, so he's concerned about the aroma. I mean, I like the recipe so far. Okay, I don't see anything wrong there. But what about the aromas? Has he got something going on there? Do you think, or are we talking? Are we looking at a normal, sort of a normal fermentation process?
Well, if here's the thing, to go from a really sour smell, sorry, to go from a fruity smell to a sour smell in a single day, um, that doesn't seem to track. I mean, realistically, once you've got a good colony of yeast going on in a mead, while they're doing their active fermentation stuff, there's not really a lot of room for a bacteria colony that would cause sourness or spoilage to get in there. The yeast are pretty much going to outcompete everything else once they're really well established. It's not until you get into secondary when they're kind of just drifting off and starting to slow down and peter out that something else can really take in and become, the dominant microflora in there. So I highly doubt this is the meat spoiling that quickly. What I'm more willing to bet is, maybe that it actually did need some nutrient and it when looking for it didn't have it, and what we're dealing with is stressed yeast that are throwing some like hydrogen sulfide or some other nasty compounds mixing with the normal smell of the fruit and stuff and giving you what's getting called pungent or sour.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because he goes on. Should I add nutrient to the fruity mead? I read other places that the smell may be due to stressed out yeast, but the
Mm-hmm.
batch seems to be producing CO2 well. So I don't think he's got a problem. I have fermented. You know, you get different smells sometimes. When my mead starts taking off or my braggots start taking off, you almost get this beer smell. It just permeates through the house. It's kind of a nice smell actually. And then it kind of subsides, and then you go open up the fermenter, and it doesn't smell like that at all anymore. It smells like something completely different. Maybe a little deeper, maybe a little richer, but
Hmm.
nothing that smells bad. I mean, bad smells to me, bad smells. I mean, you're going to turn your nose at bad smells, and you're going to know if it smells bad, right? Um, it may not be a smell that you're familiar with or that you particularly care for, but bad
Yeah.
smells smell bad, really bad.
Yeah, and he again, this is one of his first batches. It may just be an unfamiliar smell to him, and he may have nothing to worry about whatsoever.
Yeah.
It just doesn't particularly appeal to him. Or there are plenty of people that I think the first couple batches of anything fermented they make, that yeasty smell isn't necessarily the most appealing thing. But I don't know. I found myself learning to like it a couple batches in.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Ryan. Need advice for my first mead. I've done a little beer and fruit wine in the past, but now I've got a bunch of honey, so I thought I would try a mead. Just kind of a common thing for beer brewers, right? We start brewing beer, get bored, and then somebody says, "Why don't you try mead?" I so he's got this honey. He's got some navel. He's got a navel orange tree. Lucky you. So I was thinking of a really simple process like orange juice, water, 50-50, add honey to bring a special gravity up to where I want, add yeast nutrient, pitch yeast, add a little orange rind in the primary fermentation. This seemed to be like an okay plan. Am I missing any? I like this part. Am I missing anything? Yeah, a lot. Ryan, he's looking for some advice here.
The first thing is I've never added orange juice before to a
No.
must. So
Yeah.
I don't really know what to tell him on orange juice and a must there. But he said it's his first mead. He's got a bunch of honey. He chooses the navel orange tree. All right, and he says he wants to add orange rind. Maybe he means orange zest.
I hope so. Yeah.
I hope
Hope
so.
so.
There. I've done. Here's what I do. Again, maybe somebody that's used orange juice in a must can give me some better advice there. But just mix up the water and the honey to get to the gravity you want, and or just even the water just to get to the water. The get the water up to boiling or near boiling, and you can just like if you're a brewer, you've done hop backs and hop stands. I've done this. You just hop stand in your orange peels or your orange zest,
Yeah.
and then you got this like orange water, and like bakers and stuff will use orange water sometimes,
Yeah.
and then you get this orange water, and then you can add in the honey to get the gravity you want, and you can then ferment that out, and maybe add a little more, orange zest in secondary or something if you want. But yeah, I mean, if you want to introduce orange that way or introduce orange, that's a good first way to do it. This is his first mead, so without going into the whole steps of how to make your first mead, we've done a bunch of episodes about that in the past, and
Yeah.
and you can find that information. But yeah, I think go for it. Let us know how it turns out. Again, I say with your first one, just probably like your first beer, first time you made a beer, first time you made a fruit wine. This Seth, or I think this guy's name was. You wanted to keep it fairly simple. You didn't want to make your fruited sour pastry IPA stout. On your first beer out, you probably started with a kit of something pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
and the same theory works for your mead. Try something fairly straightforward and kind of learn the process a little bit before you get too crazy out there.
Jeff, we know that honey is acidic, right? So,
Yep.
and that can be uh, acid. Too much acid can be kind of a difficult thing for yeast. The whole adding orange juice thing. I mean, you're talking about dumping in He's talking 50-50 here. That's like 50%
Oof,
water, 50% orange juice. That's a ton of acid.
that is a lot of acid. I will say I have added some juice to a brew. My my wit beer braggot. When I've made that previously, I usually use the zest of about 6 oranges and the juice of about 3. Um, and I poured that all in before the boil. Um, when it's like a volume of between 6 and 7 gallons that I'm going to uh, let the boil reduce down to about 5.5. So
Yeah.
that feels like it's not a lot of orange juice for rather a lot of liquid. Going 50-50 with orange juice and water, that just seems like a bad idea. And as far as, I think Ryan's advice is spot on the money. Just use the orange zest. Maybe juice the oranges after you're done zesting them and have it for breakfast. But
There you go.
I don't think you need to put it in the mead. For a starter recipe, especially, that's not going to affect the acid content of your mead nearly as drastically as the juice will. It's a simple flavor. It's a good flavor, and you just kind of dial it in. You pull those out when you get the orange flavor you want, and let everything settle. I think it's a much cleaner and much easier approach, especially for starting out, so that you're getting something that's palatable at the gate instead of oh my god, why did I make this?
Yeah. One thing I want to say about zesting oranges, though, he mentions orange rind. Typically, when you talk about orange rind, people talk, they I think they kind of include that white part, which is again something you really don't want to put in mead because that introduces a whole lot of bitterness. Uh, One thing about orange zest, okay, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One, a potato peeler makes a fairly decent zester, but I prefer the one. It's a kind of a knife-like thing. It's got a flat end on it with probably I don't know half a dozen little sharp little holes. Okay, that are pretty small. We're talking probably a 16th of an inch in diameter, but it's like razor blade sharp. Okay, and you pull that along the skin of the orange, and all you're getting is just that orange part.
Like a
Okay,
microplane.
something like a microplane, yeah. That would be another way you could get that off of there. You're not digging into the pith, which is that white part, and just I mean, you might have to stand there for a few minutes and zest a bunch of oranges to get enough. Well, here's another thing too. A little bit of that goes a long way as well. So be careful about how many oranges you zest. You can overdo it.
Right.
But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the zesting part. Axie John, Ajax on, Ajax on.
I do wish that Reddit put these guys at least their first names on some of these posts,
I
right?
know. Anyway, beginner yeast and nutrient questions, Jeff. I'm new to this, and I think the guy at the homebrew store intentionally set me up for failure.
No, we did.
Joking. So help me out here. I have a couple of questions. I pitched my yeast without adding it. Okay, wait a minute. I pitched my yeast without adding it to water first, and I also didn't include any yeast nutrient, just champagne yeast to honey water, and that's it. So I'm a little lost there. Is this batch a failure already, or should I wait and hope for the best? Also, I'm away from home a lot. I can't put nutrient in 24, 48, 72 hours. You really don't have to do that. Or 33% after I have Saturday and Sunday to work with. What's the next best thing I could do? Nutrient, then yeast the next day, yeast, then nutrient the next day. Thanks in advance for any help. Okay, this is he needs a lot of
So
help here.
yeah, so from what I'm reading this year, and I don't think the guy at the homebrew store set you up for failure. Having worked in one, I can tell you we rely on repeat business. So
Yeah.
they definitely want you to come back. As far as what's going on here, from what I'm reading, it sounds like he didn't rehydrate his yeast and he didn't add any nutrient. And he's wondering if this is a lost cause or if there's hope for saving it. And possibly there might be hope for saving it, depending on how far gone it is already. I don't think he mentioned exactly how long it's been fermenting already, but if it's a matter of a few days, then you could probably still add some nutrient and you wouldn't have to worry about stressed yeast. Yeah. It's possible the yeast will eventually, through a lot of autolysis, chew through what it needs to get that sugar metabolized. It's not going to be slow. It's not going to be pleasant when you're done with it, but it's possible. So this is not going to be your best batch ever. It's going to be your first batch ever, and that it's all right if it's not the greatest.
Take notes. Take notes.
You get to start. Got to learn somewhere, and sometimes you get a few bad batches out of the way first. You start getting some good ones out.
Oh yeah, been there, done that. Ryan,
as far as his nutrient schedule thing goes, if you're making a really high alcohol mead, staggered nutrients the way to go. But for plenty of meads, I think you're fine just throwing your nutrients in all at once. The idea of yeast pitch on Saturday and nutrient on Sunday, once you have some positive identification that yeast is awake and doing its thing, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask Ryan, because I know that Ryan's mentioned on the show that, I think he and I have both done this. Of course, it depends on the amount of honey that you're using. When it comes to making these braggots, I mean, I don't care about staggered nutrient, all this stuff.
Right.
I throw it all in up front and be done with it. Ryan, are you good for that? Andrea, you want to wake Ryan up, please?
Sorry, I was on quiet mode there. Absolutely, you can do that. There's Ken Schramm even says for some of his meads, he puts all the nutrients in up front.
Yep.
I mean, if he's doing that, you can, you'd be just fine. So, anyway, no problem whatsoever.
Cold crashing before secondary. This comes from BMX, not FIX. BMX, not FIX. Okay. Cold crashing before secondary. Is there any reason not to do this? Probably. I have a sizer that has finished primary fermentation, but it is pretty hazy, and I'm not sure if it is just the pectin or suspended yeast. I'd like to mitigate as much as possible during racking by hopefully compacting the yeast cake. But is there any reason I should cold crash before racking to secondary, Ryan?
Is there any reason he should or I guess shouldn't cold crash for racking to secondary? There's going to be when people use the word secondary, they often mean different things. Secondary means and if you're using it that way, secondary fermentation. So an additional period of fermentation that's going to take place.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still going to have active yeast, which is going to produce, lees or trub or sediment, as some folks call it, on the bottom of their fermenter. So your goal here isn't to try to get it, crystal clear. It's not like you're going into some sort of tertiary aging and you want it to be crystal clear and you're going to bottle it, soon or something like that. So, I mean, and it depends on the yeast too. I mean, some yeast will be a little fluffier and some yeast will compact a little bit for you. But no, I mean, if you're actually having a true secondary fermentation, then you don't need to get super crazy on trying to get the all of the yeast down, so to compact and siphon up only what's clean, the ultra clear liquid above it. I guess mead at
Yeah.
that point. So no, I wouldn't worry about it, because you're going to end up with more anyway. And why go through the extra steps and the extra time and extra effort and extra steps when you're going to have to rack it again anyway, whether you go into bulk aging or bottling or whatever you're going to do from there.
I think, Jeff, that there's still a misnomer out there related to cold crashing. I've read this over and over and over in different forums where people believe that cold crashing kills the yeast.
Yes.
Okay, and it doesn't. It kind of sends it into hypothermia, right?
Yeah, it's, the yeast starts acting like a big bear at wintertime. It curls up and says, okay, well, wake me when things are a little bit more favorable for me.
Yeah.
That's it. If you get really aggressive with the cold crash, you might start killing some yeast, but you're not going to kill the colony. I think Ryan answered this pretty much exactly the way I would answer it. There's an imprecision as to what people mean with the term secondary. So is this more like a bulk aging where you're trying to clear it up and trying to basically just get it looking pretty? Or is this more like there's another 10 points, the yeast is still chugging, I just want to push it and get it off of all this trub? If it's the latter case and you're trying to get some actual fermentation done, I wouldn't cold crash. That's just going to slow things down, if not kind of shave some yeast count off of that colony. If you're just trying to clear it up, cold crashing is probably going to save you a couple days. It tends to get those guys sluggish, a little heavy, get them sinking a little faster. So why not?
I like this guy's name. This next guy, penicillin. Nurse, give this patient 12 cc's of penicillin, take his temperature in 2 hours, and call me if anything changes. Is that how that goes? Penicillin. Probably stupid question about aging a batch I just made. No, come on, dude. There's no such thing as stupid questions. Some crazy ones, but not stupid, okay? My first batch, just racked it after a month, Jeff. Tastes excellent, and it's still not, and it was still, and it was still so not expecting any secondary. Okay, so I guess he wasn't expecting any secondary fermentation. The thing is, I put the whole container in the fridge after I bottled 2 bottles to age for another month. Or 2, would I be risking spoilage to let those bottles age outside the fridge? What do you think, Jeff?
Okay, so I'm decoding this here. He says he's not expecting any secondary fermentation. It's still. So I think what he is saying is he thinks the yeast has fermented all of the sugar, or at least completed its fermentation as far as it's going to go to its alcohol tolerance. And is it safe to let that age outside of the fridge? I would say you need to look into stabilizing chemicals, because I've had mead surprise me. I made I think it was the second batch of mead that I ever made. We put that together the weekend we were waiting for my wife to go into labor with Owen. And, everything went as planned. It eventually got bottled up, and we thought it would be a cute idea to put a couple bottles away to save and see if, we could just hold on to that until he's about drinking age. Like you do. Plenty of people do that.
Yeah.
And I was still pretty young in my mead baking career and didn't know about stabilizing chemicals, but I figured everything was going to be okay. Problem was, about 3.5 years after I bottled that stuff, I am shocked out of bed one early Saturday morning by a loud pop, and then a weird splashing sound from my kitchen.
Splashing sound.
I I race over there. It's it's probably like 5:30 in the morning. There is like a haze of light. It's not even like sun up yet entirely. And I look, and the little the little 6 bottle wine holder thing on top of the fridge that one of these bottles was stored in. That bottle has shot its cork through the little plastic or like the little PVC wrap on the top,
Yeah.
and is just kind of spraying water into the middle of my kitchen.
Like a fire
3.5 years later. And at that point, having experienced that, I can say no. There really is no safe period. If there is even a lick of residual sugar left in your brew, you stabilize or you're at risk every time.
Yeah.
If it can surprise me like that, I just don't trust it.
I think the telltale sign is right in his first sentence. Made my first batch, just racked it after a month. Tastes excellent. Was still, so not expecting any secondary fermentation after a month. Yeah, that's a little soon. And the other thing here, Ryan, too, is some of these questions come, and it's evident that they don't use the hydrometer, right?
Right.
I mean, that's kind of a telltale sign here. How do you know? I mean, do you know if your yeast has run its course? Well, the best way to tell is with a hydrometer. Okay, know the yeast that you're using, know what its alcohol tolerance is, and when you get close to that tolerance, give it another week, give it another month. If it doesn't move, it's probably safe to bet that it, probably won't. But I agree with Jeff. I think using a stabilizing, some kind of a stabilizing method is the safest thing that you can do. I have read stories of people actually being hurt by some of these. They call them bottle bombs for all intents and purposes. Beer bottles actually explode, and it's like a hand grenade. I mean, it just sends shrapnel everywhere, and you're just not safe. I mean, it's not like it's not like an aimed explosive. It's not like an explosive like C4 where you can compact it and plant it and have it go off in one direction. These things are like hand grenades. Okay, it just sends shrapnel just out everywhere, and that's dangerous. So
Right.
safety first. Always when you're brewing, from sanitation to bottle, right?
To add to that, understand the alcohol tolerance that you're looking at is not fixed in stone. I mean, this is an estimate, and it's also a moving target. So if for whatever reason things become like environmentally more favorable for the yeast after an extended period of time, what was under certain conditions an alcohol tolerance of about 16 can be an alcohol tolerance of 17 and a half. And I think that's what happened here, because that was, on the height of summer, early one morning, and I'm cheap. I don't pay for, keeping the air conditioning ridiculously cold. It stays about 74, 76 in my house in the summertime. So that bottle got warmer than it had been, well, for the better part of a year, probably. Yeah, stabilized every time.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we've got a ton more questions that we could go through. The Dodgy ITA, whatever his name is, Whiskey Bosmer. I like that guy's name. Just a bunch of them here that we could run through, but I'll tell you what, we're going to save them for next time because we had just flat run out of time. We have run the limit here at the Mead House. Quite a show tonight, guys. Jeff, I really enjoyed the discussion about this gaming thing and this whole not so ancient, but recipes that seem to come from a time before. And I appreciate anybody who puts in the effort to do the research and come up with recipes like that, and then tie them into. I have to, I mean, I've got tons of time in my hand too. I have to look into these games that you're playing, and I mean, I love the whole medieval times. That, and of course, Western history. But like I said, I've been watching this series called The Viking, and
Yeah.
quite interesting. I don't know that it actually deals with historical events, but it does deal with historical times, and that's what's interesting to me. Poldark is another one. This is the British-based Masterpiece Theater. Outstanding show. I mean, just simply, I mean, the acting is unbelievable. But it's period based, and it's in real places, dealing with real time people eating, you know, period type foods. I mean, they're, the one housewife is constantly kneading bread. I mean, you know, flour and water. I mean, there was nothing else to it. I mean, they grind
Yeah.
their own grain and flour and water, and then you let it sit for days until you get a fermentation going, and then you break off a little piece and you mix it with more flour and water. And that's how you make another loaf, and then another loaf, and then another loaf. And I just keep that thing going. So I dig
Well,
all
and
that.
I need to hunt down a video for you, JD, because I don't know if you've ever seen. There's a channel on YouTube called Townsend's. They do like Revolutionary War reenactment related stuff,
Oh, yeah.
clothing, cooking gear, stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
And in one of these videos, they went to a reenactment center where they had like a brewery made in the fashion and the technology of the Revolutionary War period. So it's really wild to see how they did things back then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I watched a video on YouTube. This has been probably a couple of years, 2 or 3 years ago even. And this is over in Europe somewhere. And they were brewing beer, of course, using old methods. And back when, I mean, there was no hops, okay? They were using juniper branches for their bittering component. And but their their fermenter was wild, dude. It was this long, wide, shallow thing, okay, that they were brewing their beer in. And
Yep.
When the fermentation process was done, they pulled the cork out of the one part in the middle, and all this stuff would run into barrels. You know, I mean, it was just unbelievable. And you think, my God, I mean, this is how they brewed beer back in like the 1700s. And here we sit with these stainless steel contraptions that's got valves and hoses and this and that, things hanging off of the outside and things you put on your. I mean, here we sit, and it was just as simple back then. It was just a wooden trough that was probably, I don't know, 10, 12 feet long, maybe 5 or 6 feet wide, and maybe 6 to 8 inches deep. That was the fermentation chamber in an old barn. Okay. I mean, it's unbelievable. I just dig this kind of stuff. So, we need to do more of that. I think it's just a lot of fun. But anyway, hey, thanks for hanging out with us in this episode. And don't forget, we're going to be on hiatus for the next couple of weeks as we take our 2-week break and get ready for another 6-week stint. So, hey, let us know what you're brewing. Email us, info@themeadhouse.com, or you can send us a message on that Facebook deal or Twitter, both of those at the Mead House. So in the meantime, say happy mead making. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. That's it for this episode. Hey, Ryan, put the lights off. Just slam the door shut. Don't lock the door because I'll be in and out. Probably repainting the living room and whatnot. But anyway, hey, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Episode 187 of the Mead House. Hey, we're gone.